All right, good morning, good morning. I'm in a different area because, yeah, this place is a little bit more put together than where I was yesterday. All right, so here we are, Daily Gospel, and something I read this morning really stood out to me, and I want to share it with you. So it's in Hebrews 5, and I'm going to start just starting at verse 7 in chapter 5. Who in the days of his flesh, when he had offered up prayers and supplication with vehement cries and tears to him, who was able to save him from death, and was heard because of his godly fear, though he was a son, yet he learned obedience by the things which he suffered. And having been perfected, he became the author of eternal salvation to all who obey him. Excuse me. Verse 10, called by God as high priest, quote, according to the order of Melchizedek, end quote. And this is where I felt like I really was feeling this, is verse 11, of whom we all have to say, and hard to explain, since you have become dull of hearing. Sorry, I inhaled my breakfast before doing this. Dull of hearing. It makes me think of Isaiah 54, chapter 50, verse 4, where it basically says, it's one of the verses that I try to say to myself often, that you have given me the tongue, I'm going to paraphrase, but you have given me the tongue of the learned to speak to him who was weary a word in season. You have given me the ear of the learned so that I may hear. And morning by morning, you awake me to hear as the learned. And I was not rebellious when I heard. So when I think about, and I butchered all of that, but that's the gist of it. That's the paraphrase version. When we ask for, where do I want to start? I start off whenever I read, personally, just asking for eyes to see and ears to hear, just because I know that it helps to calm me, because I may be coming to sit down to read and I'm bringing all my emotions and bringing all myself to the table. And so sometimes I'm not able to receive certain things because I'm bringing other things, or maybe there's filters. So I always ask that I have eyes to see, because I think of Paul, who had, the scales had to fall from his eyes in order for him to really see what was going on. Yes, he read, he was learned, he was very educated in the law, but he didn't understand and he didn't see. And so there's levels to the things in which we are allowed to see. And so I always ask for that. But there's another piece of that, which are having ears to hear. So that means also another way to receive is that we hear things. And oftentimes when people give us feedback or criticism, it's hard to receive some things, especially if we are being super defensive or we feel like we're criticized often. Maybe if the person's tone isn't right. That's why they say that only 7% of what you are saying to a person, the correction, what you're actually is heard is actually the words out of your mouth. More than 50% of it is going to be your nature, what they're reading, because we're always reading body language. So more than 50% of your message is going to be body language, and something like 5% of it or something like that is tone of voice. And so I think this is also why the Bible tells us that, have our words seasoned with salt, so that they can be delivered, that they can be received. So here it's like, I feel like there's a conviction here, become dull of hearing. When your hearing is dull, it's not sharp, right? So you're not taking in things. Maybe that there's echoey sounds, when you listen to a bad sound system, or I was going to say like a scratch CD, but yeah, half of the people don't even know what that is. But just dull hearing. And of course, now the dog wants to be barking in the background, and yet I'm going to finish. So I think we all should ask ourselves, have we become dull of hearing? And how can we sharpen our hearing to hear what's being said, to hear the message, to be able to receive the message? This is why the Bible often talks about like the circumcision. And yes, that was part of the law, but in the New Testament, there's a circumcision of the heart, remove the barriers, the walls that we've put up, and make it a little bit more tender to receive. And that has to put us in a humble position. You have to be in a position of humility in order to receive feedback, critique, and just to be curious. Don't get defensive. Verse 12, for though by this time you ought to be teachers, you need someone to teach you again the first principles of the oracles of God, and you have come to need milk and not solid food. For everyone who partakes only of milk is unskilled in the word of righteousness, for he is a babe. But solid food belongs to those who are full age, that is, those who by reason to use have their senses, eyes, ears, touch, feelings, all those senses, exercised to discern both good and evil. So there is an imparting of wisdom that we can receive through all of our senses. That's why God gave us all these senses. Otherwise, we could just have one. But God was super intentional when creating. So are you using all these senses, or really it's a heart posture thing? You got to check, like, what's going on that these things have become dull, that you've put up walls and boundaries and you can't receive. And now this is going, I feel like, yes, he's talking to believers, specifically the author of Hebrews, but this is also, unbelievers have the same thing. Everyone's dealing with various differences, with various issues, but the core might be very similar. Yes, for a believer, we are aware of the spiritual nature, and we are aware that Jesus and that God is always working. And maybe an unbeliever hasn't come to that yet, but they might be dull of hearing as well. So I feel like this is across the board. In general, for an unbeliever, it could be in the workplace when you're getting feedback, when it's time for reviews, you're not hearing what your supervisor is telling you, right? You don't read the signs, but yet you've been getting a 3 in comes to work and on timeliness and being on time and turning your reports in on time, and you're fighting that back saying, oh, I'm always on time. But if you've been receiving a 3 on your report, I don't even know if they do it by numbers. If you've been receiving that for a while, then maybe perhaps that is true, and maybe you need to look and reflect. But oftentimes, if you're being defensive, or you don't want to have anything see that, then you aren't learning and growing. And I don't know what books I've been reading so much lately. It just kept saying over and over, abound more and more. And so we're supposed to grow more and more. And one revelation I had this morning is the reason that we're called to grow, that we can't stay on milk, that we need to get solid food, is because we're supposed to grow. As humans, we grow up, we grow out, we get stronger. The capacity of our brain is stretched. We can see what we're capable of. But also, the Bible talks a lot about being a vessel. And if you grow as a vessel, that means you enlarge the amount in which you can hold. And so the Lord is trying to pour so much love into us. But if we don't grow, there's a limited capacity of what we can hold, which then implies that there is a limited capacity of what we can hand out. So this morning I woke up really feeling like I actually want to pour into others today. Like, I was thinking about different things that I could do for others today. And the reason is I woke up so incredibly grateful. Today is my birthday, and I just feel really grateful that God has let me see another year. And so in turn, it's like, man, I actually want to bless other people. So although I don't like cupcakes or cake, it's not really my thing. Now, I do like a sweet, but my kids are so hyped about my birthday because they're like, you're getting cake? I'm like, I'm not, but I'm gonna buy them cupcakes because they're so excited about it. I'd rather have a slice of pie or something, but it's just, I want to pour out. And so my epiphany this morning was like, man, we're supposed to abound more and more. We're supposed to grow to solid food so that we can be a vessel in which God can pour more of his unending love for us, in which case then we are pouring out from an outpouring and overflow. As a mom, I have definitely poured out some love, but it was stuff at the bottom because I wasn't full. And I was just pouring out dredge. I was doing things to help other people, but I was doing it from like the stuff at the bottom of the vessel, which is not good. What we want to do is pour from an overflow. So we need to grow and grow more and more so that we can pour out, from the top, from the good stuff, and I also see here that we ought to be teachers. And something that I've been convicted lately is like, okay, my children really should be my first disciples. I should be helping them to learn and grow. And yes, they see me put into practice. And yes, we do things, but being more intentional about what that means. Because regardless if you are being intentional about stuff, people are learning from you all the time. People are taking in data from you all the time. Your fruit, whether or not you're a believer or not, what your actions are telling people information about you all the time. You're handing out information, whether you believe it or not, whether you know or not, you are giving out information. And so once you have a revelation that, man, I am showing someone how to treat me, because I'm treating them a certain type of way, they're responding to me in this kind of way. And so we are to be teachers, and we can't do that if we have dull ears, if our senses have become dull. And for the believers, this is even more impactful, because you should be aware of these things, and dare I say, you should be further along in the progress. You should be abounding at another level than earlier believers. So when I first started, I would often call myself a baby Christian. And, now I feel like I'm, in toddler. I'm definitely walking, running, bumping into things. But the maturity of our life, of our spiritual life, needs to be growing on a regular basis. And I think that there are a lot of people who are comfortable at the level that they're at in their walk with Christ. And I feel like, to be honest, it's a little bit irritating as a, newer believer, as a toddler in Christ. I'm eating some solid food. It's a little bit spongy, but I'm like, man, when I look around, I see people who say they believe, but the fruit isn't very tasty. And so I think that God is calling us, all of us, to sharpen our senses so that we can receive what he's trying to download in us. And if at bare minimum today you get nothing else from this, is like, okay, grow, step your game up, grow a little bit more. What is one thing you could do today that could expand you to receive more of the love of God, so that then you have more love to give? You can even, and it won't even take so much energy, because when I think about pouring out, I'm like, ladling, that's going to take muscle, that's going to take effort. It's almost like if I was pouring in something and I'm just like, I'm not paying attention, I just keep going and going and going, it's going to be spilling, running over. There's less effort involved. It will be so effortless to pour out love to others once you open up yourself and you keep growing in the knowledge of the Lord, in all his precepts, and his be willing to have him work in you, to surrender some things so that your desires change. It will become effortless to do these things that right now maybe feel really hard. So that's all. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great day. Bye.